Aliens wanted prisoners of war. What they got were Deathworld hunters in chains. Commander Vextal clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he surveyed the latest batch of human prisoners in the holding bay. 47 specimens from the Deathworld, called Earth, captured during the recent skirmish near the Proxima station. The hegemony had specific plans for these creatures. Magnificent specimens, purred Science Officer Clickra, her 3 eyes gleaming as she studied the readouts. Average mass 70 kilograms, dense bone structure, redundant organ systems. Perfect for the labor camps on Xerion Prime. Vextal nodded. The humans had proven surprisingly resilient in combat, but like all primitive species, they would break under proper conditioning. The hegemony had perfected the process across a dozen worlds. Capture the warriors, break their spirits through controlled deprivation and psychological manipulation, then deploy them as expendable labor in the most dangerous mining operations. Begin standard pacification protocols, Vextal ordered. Reduce food rations by 30%, increase gravity to 1.3 standard, and ensure the detention cells remain at suboptimal temperature. What the hegemony failed to understand was that they hadn't captured soldiers. They had captured apex predators. Sergeant Maria Santos pressed herself against the cold metal wall of the cell, watching, always watching. Beside her, Corporal Chenwei counted the guard rotations for the 15th time. In the corner, Private Jackson assessed the structural weaknesses in the containment field generator with the patient eye of someone who had once hunted grizzly bears in Alaska. "Food's getting scarcer," whispered Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the expedition's xenobiologist who had been captured during the evacuation. "They're trying to weaken us." Santos smiled, a predator's expression that would have chilled any human who saw it. Good. Hungry predators are dangerous predators. The aliens had made their first mistake by assuming human warriors were like their own, creatures of comfort who would crumble when that comfort was removed. They didn't understand that humans had crawled from the primordial ooze of a world that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it. They had evolved not just to survive, but to thrive when everything went wrong. Chen had already identified 17 different ways to weaponize the nutrient paste they were fed. Jackson had memorized the guard patterns and located 3 separate vulnerabilities in the cell's power grid. Dr. Tanaka had been conducting subtle behavioral experiments on their captors, mapping their psychological weaknesses with the same methodical approach she had once used to study the mating habits of deep-sea predators. The second mistake came when Commander Vextal decided to make an example. "The human designated Santos will be brought to Interrogation Chamber 7, he announced over the intercom. "Cooperation will be rewarded. Resistance will be educated." They dragged Santos through corridors lined with trophy cases, bones, and artifacts from dozens of conquered species. Each display was meant to break the spirit, to show the futility of resistance. Santos memorized every detail, cataloging potential weapons and escape routes with the focused attention of someone whose ancestors had tracked mammoths across frozen tundra. The interrogation chamber was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Harsh lights, uncomfortable angles, and the subtle scent of fear pheromones designed to trigger panic responses in most sapient species. Vextal loomed over the restraint chair, his chitinous form imposing and alien. "Your species has impressed us with its tenacity," he began. "But surely you understand the futility of resistance. Look around you. See the remains of civilizations that thought themselves mighty." Santos looked. She saw improvised weapons. She saw structural weak points. She saw an alien species that had grown soft from too many easy victories. "You're right," she said quietly. "We should have surrendered immediately." Vextal preened, mistaking submission for victory. "Excellent. You will return to your cell and convince the others." Santos moved. The restraints, designed for creatures with traditional joint structures, couldn't accommodate human shoulder flexibility. Her dislocated shoulder allowed just enough movement to reach the neural probe interface. One violent twist and suddenly she was free, spinning in the low gravity like a dancer of death. The neural probe became a weapon. Vextal's carapace, evolved for dominance displays rather than actual combat, cracked like an eggshell. The alarm, Klaxons began screaming 3 minutes later, when Santos had already disabled the interrogation chamber's locks and begun her methodical advance through the ship. But by then, the real nightmare had begun. Chen had used the distraction to overload the cell's power grid. Jackson had fashioned weapons from their food containers. Dr. Tanaka had convinced 2 guards to enter the cell by feigning a medical emergency, then demonstrated why humans were the only species on Earth to regularly hunt creatures larger than themselves. They moved through the ship like a plague of intelligent locusts. Every corridor became a hunting ground. Every maintenance shaft became a highway for predators who had once navigated the Amazon rainforest and the mountains of Afghanistan. The aliens had never encountered a species that considered confined space as an advantage rather than a trap. The hegemony crew panicked. Their weapons were designed for long-range combat, not close quarters fighting against creatures that seemed to anticipate their every move. Their tactics were built around overwhelming force, not the surgical precision of humans who had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing efficiently. Within 6 hours, the entire ship belonged to 47 humans who had turned a prison transport into their personal hunting preserve. Commander Vextal, bleeding from 17 different wounds, found himself dragged before Santos in what had once been his own command center. Around them, his crew knelt in improvised restraints, guarded by humans who had fashioned weapons from coffee makers and meditation crystals. "You wanted prisoners of war," Santos said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of an apex predator. "What you got were Deathworld hunters in chains. The problem with chaining hunters, Commander, is that eventually they get hungry." She leaned closer, and Vextal finally understood the true horror of what his species had awakened. These weren't soldiers who had been broken by war. These were humans who had been forged by it, shaped by a world that had taught them that there was no situation so desperate that it couldn't be turned into an opportunity. "Now," Santos continued, "let's discuss the terms of your surrender." The last transmission from the hegemony vessel was a single, terrified message sent by Vextal himself. "Do not engage the humans in ground combat. Do not capture them. Do not underestimate them. They are not prey. They are the thing that prey fears in the dark." The humans, meanwhile, set course for the nearest hegemony stronghold. After all, they had a war to win, and they had just learned that their enemies made excellent teachers in all the ways one should never treat a human prisoner. The hunt was just beginning.